Well, jeepers! You're listening to Smash or Pass.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another interview on the JayBee and Milly channel. I am JayBee and joining me is Milly.
Hi.
And we have Sophie.
Hey.
And we have Dan.
Hi.
And the very special guest, returning guest, who we'll be speaking to today is Mr. Bob Singer. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm happy to be with you.
Oh, it's just such an honor to have you back here. Truly an absolute legend in both the Scooby scene, but in animation in general. And so I would like to build up an idea of your career starting from the beginning. And of course, based on what IMDB tells us, your first career, it first started in 1957. But before that point, what led you down the path of animation?
Well, when I finished high school, no, it wasn't high school, it was junior college, community college. I went to Disney's for an interview, and I wasn't hired, but it's a good thing I wasn't, because I really was not trained. So I decided to go to art school. And after several years there, it was hard to get work after I graduated here, because it was really, all the artwork was done in Chicago, New York, other cities. So I just took whatever I could get, working for an advertising agency, pasting up a type. But after a year of that, a friend called me from the Seamus Culhane Studios in, I guess it was Universal City. He said, "Get over here with your portfolio. A guy just quit, a background painter." So I went over and I showed him my portfolio of art school stuff, but it was pretty ordinary stuff, just a few line drawings and figure drawings. But at the end of it, I had put in some little pieces of cartoon characters, and I was hired on the spot. And the amazing thing is, they hired me to paint backgrounds.
Wow,
Which is unusual, because I had no backgrounds in my portfolio. But the reason for telling you this is the fact that they weren't teaching animation in the schools like they are now. But you learned on the job. If they would hire a talented painter or an artist, and they would teach them how to do backgrounds. So after a couple of weeks, I was not being supervised anymore. I was doing the work, picked it up.
Oh, wow, that is amazing.
Kept my eyes open and watching what everybody else was doing.
And getting to that stage, I know you said there were some cartoons in your portfolio, things like that. Was there any artists or shows in particular that you think inspired you towards getting to that point?
Well, I always enjoyed the Warner Brothers cartoons and the Disney cartoons. And also the other part of me was the illustrator who liked Norman Rockwell. So it's funny, all through my career, when I draw pictures, I try to tell a story like Norman Rockwell did. I just enjoy doing that. Like, I'll show you a piece I just did a couple of months ago.
Oh, wow.
It's Hanna-Barbera characters. Here's what it looks like.
Oh,
That's
See,
amazing.
I'm telling a story with the kids playing, and everybody's watching.
that's amazing.
So that's what I like to do. After a year there, they laid me off because they closed down the studio. So I was freelancing around doing storyboards, picking up slide film backgrounds, until my big break was that Warner Brothers was doing a picture that had some cartoon parts of it. Some was live action, some was stock footage, and they wanted an hour-long storyboard from a script. And I had only done one storyboard in my life up to then. That was for a commercial. So again, I said, yes, I'll do it, accepting the challenge. And I ended up doing about 4 storyboards for those people on different subjects, and 500 pages each, all pinned up on a big board. They called it a pin-up board. And in between pictures, they wanted me to still be available. So they sent me down to the cartoon department to paint backgrounds at Warner Cartoons. It wasn't that easy to get in there, but since I was working for the main studio, they took me in and gave me a picture and taught me how to do it. That was so much fun.
Oh, and when it comes to Hanna-Barbera in particular, do you remember what the first show you worked on for them was?
Well, they were doing Johnny Quest. As long as I'm just saying that, I did a Johnny Quest little drawing for someone, but the layouts were all finished. So I said, hey, I could paint backgrounds. So they sent me to the second floor to the background department, and I painted 3 months on the Johnny Quest show. By the way, the Johnny Quest show is being revived. There's a producer here in Arizona who's putting together a crew, writing stories, and he's going to do new 24-minute Johnny Quests. So I think that's pretty exciting. We're all waiting for that to happen.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Of course, after the quest was finished, I went down to the layout department and was working on Space Ghost and Dynaboy. And the problem was that that's a realistic show. You know, a lot of us weren't used to that. We were all cartoonists. So because of that, Doug Wildy, who was the producer, hired some New York comic strip drawers who could draw this kind of work, adventure style. So, but after Quest was done, they all went back to New York or went to other studios because we didn't keep them on. You know, every year Hanna-Barbera would hire people, then lay them off, so they were off about 3 months. Then we had to hire them back again when production started. So we were a bunch of gypsies, really, trying to find work here for work there. But we always managed to do something.
I mean, you mentioned the backgrounds, and they're just beautiful pieces in the original animation. As we know, you've always worked on Scooby Doo as well, and you were the layout artist on Scooby Doo Where Are You? How did you start working on that show?
Well, it was a brand new show, and all of a sudden, Mr. Iwo Takamoto was designing characters, and he wouldn't let anybody help him. He designed all the characters by himself. And I had been in charge of Space Ghost, Dynaboy. So they brought me into Scooby Doo and asked me to run the layouts on that show. Unfortunately, one of our designers, Alex Toth, who was a freelancer, had quit, and we hired him back for this show. And luckily we did, because he was able to design all the bad guys and the monsters, and I did a few of those too. But that saved us, or else we would have been in a bit of trouble, I think.
That is really interesting, especially given how you mentioned how the monsters were designed, and of course how Mr. Takamoto kept, or liked to keep, things quite close to his chest, and understandably so. But in the last interview that we had with you, you mentioned how you had a major hand in designing the Mystery Machine. So when it came to that, like, what led you to designing that over, say, Mr. Takamoto wanting full control of that, and what was your design process like for the Mystery Machine?
Well, he gave me this drawing of a Volkswagen side view, 3/4 front view, and he said, color it, put some color on there. And I remembered that about that time that there was a big movement in Hollywood and around the country for flower children. I guess it was the area of Woodstock or something. But I used that theme by drawing flowers on the side of the vehicle with light colors like green, yellow, and blue. And everybody liked it, so that's what they did. It's amazing, neat. I live in near Fresno, California now, And there were about 3 cars who were designed just like that Mr. Mobile. They painted those colors and flowers on them. Funny to see them. But Scooby is so popular now. After all these years, he was created in 1968. And in 69, we were broadcasting it. But ever since then, it's been running somewhere. And I get people who want me to draw Scooby and the other characters, because it's still loved by so many. I was surprised.
It is such a testament, given that you mentioned, Scooby was, it was thought of in America in 1968, and even literally like the other day, Milly's parents sent us photos of a mystery machine that they saw all the way in Yorkshire, UK. So it really has impacted the whole world. It's incredible.
It's funny, the Facebook goes all over the place. I get letters from England, from Czechoslovakia, from Germany, people who are still interested in those characters.
Definitely lasted the test of time in a major way. And in terms of those episodes, like there's so many ones that you can pick from the original series that have become so iconic. Of course, an episode like What a Night for a Night. But in terms of those individual episodes, about how long did it take from start to finish to make one of them?
It takes 3 months from this written script until it's on the air.
Oh, wow.
We have quite an assembly line there at the studio, from the script to storyboard to layout, and then to animation and the background painting, and then the rest of it, camera work. Takes about 3 months. So every week we had to turn out one. And in order to do that, we had to split it up among several people to do the layouts. I think on a night for a night, we had 2 of us, me and another man. The storyboard, the first one, was done by Howard Swift, a freelance storyboard man. And since I was doing the first layouts on Scooby, we had to establish some sort of background style, because the characters weren't either adventure like Johnny Quest, or they weren't cartoony. They were in between, what I call the comedy adventure style. So I drew backgrounds that were straight, but a little slightly cartoonized so that they would fit the characters. And everyone else had to follow that style pretty much.
Wow, that's incredible. And I think JB was kind of, touching on there, just the duration that Scooby-Doo has been around for. And for you personally, when you were working on the show, was there any kind of feel for you that this was a project that really was going to stand the test of time? Because like you said, all the way up until now, we're seeing annual content and movie every year, things like that. Was there anything about this project at the time that just kind of indicated to you just how successful it would be?
We didn't know that. We do a lot of different cartoons, and then we have to wait for them to be shown in the ratings to come in, and the network has to look at it and see if they want to get a second season out of it. So we were just drawing it, but we didn't know how it was received until I retired, and I began to talk to fans. And they just loved the show. We didn't know that. We were just doing our daily work. But we were very gratified to see the response of the public. And the fact that it's lasted all these years is 55 years or so that it was created.
Yeah,
that's a long time
next year, I think.
For a character to be like Mickey Mouse lasted a long time, and Flintstone did too. But people want the Scooby characters mostly. Yeah. And Tom and Jerry, and sometimes the Flintstones or Yogi Bear, but nothing beats Scooby. They just love it.
It's
I've done really a lot of stuff on Scooby.
And like JB was saying, my parents over the weekend saw a mystery machine near my niece's school. In front of JB's parents' house, somebody has their van decorated like the mystery machine, and it just sometimes pulls up outside, and the people get out and go surfing. So we see mystery machines relatively intermittently across the UK. And so for you, kind of understanding just how well received the show was, do you remember the first time you saw a mystery machine or overheard a conversation where people were speaking about Scooby-Doo that, really resonated to you? This, really has been a major success.
Yeah, I was very surprised when I saw it. And it's terrific. Anyway, that show is, I guess, more popular than Mickey Mouse was. Scooby-Doo, he's lasted all these years. Do they still have the Scooby Doo Mistakes show on the air? Have you heard about that?
Yeah, I think there's a blog or a forum where it shows sometimes like where Daphne's tights would disappear. I think there's some of those knocking around still.
There's some Scoobies that are embarrassing me because, like the one with Sonny and Cher as guest stars, was animated overseas, and I swear they must have had high school students animating that stuff. It was really bad, and I get embarrassed when I see that. But the Scooby-Doo show just made fun out of it. Every time I'm missing eyebrows or missing an arm or something, it'd show it. So it's really funny the way it worked out.
I think if anything, I think you kind of added context to, like you say, having a short time to turn the episodes around and everything. I think if you look now, when there's even more technology out there to support them, they still have more time, and there's all these other factors like to consider, that they have all this technology kind of assisting with things now that they wouldn't have then, and still have all more time to get everything together. So honestly, I think kind of the time scales and everything into consideration, it's still so impressive.
Yeah, they redesigned the characters to look much more simple. But not only Scooby Show, but they redesigned Mickey Mouse too. I think it's called Runaway Train, that series they're doing. I just don't like what they lack any warmth at all. They're very thin character-wise. Just don't like it. I wish they wouldn't do that. I wish somebody would do some new Scoobies with the old characters the way they looked. I really miss that.
Yeah,
Yuval Takamoto designed all the characters, and he wouldn't let anybody touch him. Maybe he knew that it was going to be big, I don't know, but he designed all the model sheets in about 2 weeks.
Wow.
Scooby alone had about 4 or 5 different model sheets with all the poses. And, it was tough to draw that dog. I always had to have a model sheet in my left hand when I drew it. Because it's a complicated character. Oh, there is a story, and maybe you heard this one. Scooby was designed as a 4-legged animal, but one storyboard man put him on 2 legs because he was having trouble drawing it, I guess. But it went through without us knowing about it, and went into animation, so it was too late to change it. Okay. So I had to make several more model sheets with the standing Scooby, just to fill it in so everybody would do it right. But that's how his character changed by mistake, really. But actually, it opened up the plot so he could dress as another person or a bad guy or walk around as a woman or whatever. So actually, it was okay, I guess.
Yeah,
I was surprised.
Oh, and I know earlier you touched on Sonny and Cher in that episode, and obviously that came from the new Scooby Doo movies. I think other than just having guests on, that also had like a wider variety of locations. So was that a bit of additional pressure to you when you're having to design all these different locations for the gang to go to?
Oh, well, I was very indebted to any libraries around town because I used to go there. There's a library, it's in Glendale called the Brand Library, that got the MGM file of photographs from old movies. It was all categorized. So I would go over there and ask them to bring out everything you have on pirate ships. They would bring me everything that was done, and I would rent them and take them back to the studio and use that for reefers. Or we had quite a few books too. That's another story that I think last time I spoke to you, I mentioned that kids who want to get into art or animation should get a good education because you never know what you're going to be asked to draw. And you have to be familiar with the library and how to use it. And even though it takes a couple of hours to go out to one and gather all this reference material, it'll be well worth it. Yeah, it's important to get all the education you can. And if you get to college, take all the art courses or go to an art school like the Art Center, and it's now in Pasadena. It used to be in Los Angeles. Or Cal Arts in California. It's a very good one. They hire a lot of people from Cal Arts into the Disney studio. Anyways, and also I used to, as gypsies, we had to go from one studio to another wherever the work was. And we had to adapt to the style of that particular studio, the way they drew their backgrounds and the way they drew the characters. So we had to learn quickly how to recognize how they were drawn and do that style. Remember, we did at UPA, we did a picture, Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol. And the background styling was Mr. Magoo type, which was really born in J. Ward Studios in Hollywood. They used that style of simplicity. And I picked it up. I tried to understand why they were drawn that way, and I picked it up, but it's hard to explain to anybody what it is. I can't just sit you down and say, this is what you do, this, this, and this. It doesn't work. You have to understand by looking at it. And that means you have to be very versatile if you're going to go at animation. You can't just say, well, I'll design my own characters and I'll go in and sell it. It doesn't work that way. You'll have to go in as an apprentice or an assistant and pick it up by watching other artists, seeing what they do. And the more drawing, I was lucky to go to art school and learn how to draw from the model, which sharpened my observational skills. Or go out in the field and draw a barn or some building or trees. You have to get used to looking at something and even doing portraits, trying to get them as accurate as you can. It's important to train your eye-hand coordination. Very important.
Yeah. So just in terms of, you said there about how you learn a lot on the job. So in terms of Scooby Doo, was there anything you learned or could reuse from like the original Where Are You that made it working on the later versions a bit easier?
No, the tough part was designing the monsters. I must have done 4 or 5 of them. And I had to be in the Scooby style, not so threatening. You know, the reason Scooby was born is because the network said, hey, all this violence, there's too much violence in these cartoons like Johnny Quest and Herculoids, Space Ghost, people shooting at each other. And so they asked us to make a new show, maybe based on some live action shows like I Love a Mystery or Dobie Gillis or some other shows that they were sort of comedy mystery. And that's what Scooby was designed to be, a comedy mystery show. And there was no dog in the beginning until I think Fred Silverman at the network, CBS, said, why don't you put in a dog? And then they found out, hey, the dog could be the lead. Let's name it Scooby Doo or What's Scared or something like that. But so it just evolved that way. But it was made because of the problems the networks were having with these groups outside, not liking the violence in cartoons. It all opened up a whole new genre of shows like Blue Club and, but you can probably name more than I could. So it really worked. It was good.
For the Scooby Doo show, you were the layout artist, but also the production designer. How does this affect your process going into that series?
Well, they asked me to run the layouts, and since I was doing that, I had to look at everybody's work and go through it, page by page, make sure all the camera mechanics were correct. And then they asked me to take over. Well, I decided, since we're getting increased production, I went to Jane Barbera, who was production manager. I said, Jane, we have to have a character design department, because up to now, all the layout men design their own incidental characters, like the cop, the bad guy, props, vehicles, and it slowed everything down. We were only doing like 3 or 4 shows a week, a semester during the season. But now we're getting more like 5, 6, 7, 10 shows. We ended up doing 14 shows with 13 segments each. And I saw that we were going to have a problem. So she said, all right, Bob, go start it. So myself and another guy began to establish just a character design department, and I had to appoint someone else to take over the layout department. I couldn't do both. And so all of a sudden, after a while, we had 15 artists that are hired in to do not only design characters, but to do the turnarounds and paste them up into mono sheets and do the lettering on them. And so that worked out, and that Mr. Hanna was very appreciative that we did all the models that year with a very heavy schedule. And then we began to make a background file of just backgrounds, so that every single background, pans and 12 fields, were made. We would put a Xerox copy into a file. So if anybody had another picture with the street scenes of a downtown city, we could go into a file and pick up former BGs and either use them as was or change them slightly so that they could be used again. So that's what you call stock footage. Even the animation did that. They had stock runs that they could establish, and they could use that to do another character doing a run. It was just saving a lot of time and effort, not have to invent that stuff all over again. So pretty soon I found that I was asked to be in charge of not only the layouts, but the background drawing and also character design. So I became a supervisor of all that. And then I appointed people to take over each of those departments because I wanted to be in publicity. So I became an art director of publicity. And that's how I evolved in the studio. But I think I told the story last time that I didn't ever see myself as a supervisor. I just wanted to do my work. But when Space Ghost was in trouble, I had some ideas that they liked for making the work faster and easier. So they put me in charge of Space Ghost. So all of a sudden I was telling people what to do, which I never intended to do that. I was too shy in my younger years. Even later on, when I retired, I began to do limited editions and asked to appear at Hanna-Barbera stores, which were around the country. And even when the stores closed, I kept doing it for the studio. So I've done a 45 or so limited editions, like the ones that are on my wall here. There's one right there. I got over my shyness by talking to groups. Even though I was nervous the first time, I found I enjoyed it, because the secret of talking to anybody who's shy out there, know your subject. Because if you do that, they're going to listen to your words and not look at you and just see what color shirt you have or whether you're nervous or whatever. If you know your subject, then you'll enjoy the talk and they will enjoy you too. Anyway, that's one thing I enjoy doing is talking to fans who love the show. They still do. They just love it.
Well, it's just absolutely fascinating hearing how the production was to create these episodes. I mean, I think we could all say watching the reruns of these shows, we were fascinated about how these shows were created. I always wanted to dissect how each and every part was made. So to hear all these stories, we appreciate it so much, how much work you've put into these episodes, because we absolutely adore these series, don't we?
Oh yeah, it's timeless, really.
I was very fortunate in my life to get into animation. Drawing pictures that day, you can't beat that. Really, it's a wonderful thing to be in. But if you get into animation, you can also do other kinds of artwork, because you've learned a lot about, you could do children's books, greeting cards. I was asked to illustrate 6 books with Hanna-Barbera characters. And I said, yes, I'll do that. I'd never illustrated a book before in my life, but I've always said yes to challenges. That's another story right there. Somebody's challenging you to do something, go say, yes, I'll do it. But find out how you do it, talk to people who've done it, look at a lot of the work that's been done already and just pick it up and dive in. But I did do the 6 books in 8 months. Usually it takes a whole year to do one. But I had to hire a lot of freelance people from the industry, and I had at this time I was not in the studio anymore. I was working elsewhere, and I established a studio, a company to do this. Singer Bandy Incorporated had a partner, and we got those 8 books done, 48 pages each, 6 books. That's a lot of artwork, but I made a big mistake. I didn't, in the contract I signed, I didn't say, do I get the artwork back? Mm-hmm. So what happened is I found that the artwork that I had given them, I never got back, and I found it for sale in art stores, a lot of it. So this company didn't treat me right, or else I was just not too naive to know that I should get the artwork back. Because there is a law in New York, you can say, I want the original artwork back, even though you use it for whatever you use it for. But that's another lesson I learned. But I didn't do well hiring. I think I hired 38 people, freelance, to do drawing, background painting, inking, paint to sell, all the rest of it. But so I actually lost money on the project, but I learned how to illustrate books, so that was worth it. Yeah, because I've done several since then. Well, there, even though animation art is something to learn, you can use it in other areas. There's lots of jobs out there, but you have to go look for them.
Yeah, 100%. And I think Sophie mentioned something about learning about the behind the scenes of all the production and stuff, which is absolutely fascinating. And so the thing that really strikes me as interesting is that formation of character design, how it was the case where a lot of artists beforehand were designing incidental characters, but one of the fan favorite characters to come out of that era was Scooby Doo. Do you remember the process behind creating that character and who exactly did that? And I guess what led to the formation and creation of Scooby Doo?
Scooby Doo was designed by Iwo Takamoto, the same guy who did all the other characters. I think there was another Scooby besides wasn't there?
Scooby Doo.
Oh, Lady Scooby.
Mm.
That was it. We had a lady dog in a film, and I guess I don't know who designed that one. But you know, when you design a character, you have to do it from the script. And if you can, you get sketches that you've done to a board man, because he won't know what to draw for a bad guy. He may just dream something up, but if there's not enough time. But first, you would do, let me show you. I have some more artwork I can show you.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Here is some characters I've designed for the studio, girls. They do a front view. A three-quarter view is the look that you do first, because it shows the volume. Here's some more now. Different types. Here's another one. I use this board when I do lectures in groups. I'll show this artwork to show them the kind of work I do. Here's an example of 4 of the same character, but I did 4 versions, and I told the producer, which one do you like? Oops, it's shiny. This was one he picked. But any one of them would have worked, I suppose. Here's a squirrel. Here's a bad guy that was in a Scooby. I forget his name. Maybe you do remember it. But that was my first drawing. And then we had to do turnarounds and some poses on it first. Well, I used to paint backgrounds, so you might be interested in this. There is a pan background I did for a slide film. That's another area that a cartoonist can go into. I bet you couldn't guess what kind of paint I used. It's not acrylic or watercolor, it's oil paint.
Mm-hmm.
I found out that you could paint with oil paint on paper if you use it with only turpentine as the medium, because it'll dry in 30 minutes, it'll be dry. And you can use it thin like this is very thin here. Like you can use it like watercolor. It's very, and also since it's wet, you can scrape lines in it, and because you can get to the background and make white lines. I had a slide film. I did 80 of these backgrounds, and I had to do it in 2 weeks. So at first I tried out to do it in colored paper backgrounds, but it wouldn't work. I just couldn't do it fast. So I finally dreamed up this this method. Of course, before you do paper or a bit of paper, you've got to coat the paper with something, either a white paint or whatever, so that it'll accept the oil. Anyway, I've done a lot of different kinds of things in my life. Besides, I started out as a background painter, ended up as a storyboard man, and I've done layouts, and I've done character design, so all those 4 areas, and publicity shots, and limited editions. So there are lots of different kinds of work in animation, not just animating. And it's really fun to work with other artists. They learn from you and you learn from them. And, it's fun to stand in a camera room and watch the man shoot the pictures, having to replace the cell every single step and shoot 2 frames. And because it takes 2 frames on each shot. If you don't, you can do 3, you can actually see it too slow, but two works just fine. I once talked about having to design Electric Monster, and I went to a power station nearby, and I didn't get any inspiration at all for it. So I just drew a hulking monster, and it was like orange or red color. And I asked the paint department to sponge on texture. And if you shoot it on ones, it'll flicker like this. And that really worked, if you remember that cartoon with the electric monster.
Yeah, it's absolutely iconic, and I just want to thank you additionally as well for like being open to share these stories, because it's like a glimpse back into that golden era that would be, I feel, lost in its purity without you being willing and so willing to come on and sharing about them. So I wanted to kind of dig a bit deeper into that. Like, do you have a particular memory or a particular moment that you recall from your time being either a production designer or a supervisor supervising Scooby Doo?
Well, as being a supervisor, I had to hire people and lay them off. So I was hiring into the studio, and a woman came and she showed me her life drawings from school. I thought they were good, so I hired her. And then the next day, another man comes in, and he had almost the same drawings. And I hired him too because I liked the drawings. I found out later they were husband and wife, and they both used the same portfolio from hers. Mm-hmm. But they got hired, and surprisingly, they both become very good drawers and were very successful. We're glad we have them. Of course, I had to lay people off too. I didn't like to do that when the work got scarce. We had the production season about 6 or 7 months, and then we had a layoff period. During that period, most of them were laid off, but a certain 6 or 7 of us were kept on all year round because we worked on new show development. So when Mr. Barbera had an idea for a new show, we would do the drawings, and we would put the artwork on boards like these and show it. He would take them to New York and show it to network. And he might spend 3 or 4 days there until they worked it out that they would either buy it or not buy it or whatever. But many times that crew had to hurry up and make sure that Mr. Barbera had the artwork on time. So we worked late at night sometimes, and sometimes on the weekend till 2:30 in the morning, getting that artwork done. And when I joined the group, they started right away at 5:30 when the day was over, and they would start drawing. When I came in, I saw that people weren't eating. So I instituted the idea of bringing in Chinese food or sandwiches or something, and the studio would have to pay for it. But I was surprised nobody had thought of that before I joined the group. So it was kind of a new thing for me to supervise people. But I just found out I just loved talking to people, especially fans that I meet when I do an appearance somewhere. They just loved Scooby especially. That's what they ask about mostly.
And of course you were talking, sorry. Sorry, I was going to say, you were talking there about your role as a supervisor, and you've been everything from layout artist, production designer, supervisor. Is there one of those roles that stands out to you the most as been the thing that you enjoy doing the most, or kind of what the transition between the roles is like?
Of all the things I've done, the most fun was just doing layouts. I think Scooby ran 6 years or something like that, maybe more than that. And also, I enjoy doing storyboards. Like the studio got this new show, Tom and Jerry Kids, and Mr. Barbera asked me to do the first storyboard, and it was the first time using those two characters as younger kids, not as the ones that were made at MGM. But so I enjoyed doing storyboards quite a bit, and Mr. Barbera whenever a storyboard was done, he went through his hands, he looked at it, and he'd call the storyboard people in, like me and others, and we would spend half an hour going over the board, and he would add bits of dialogue or suggestions for action. That was really a lot of fun to work with him. He's such a gentleman, and he treated the artist with respect. And in the studio, whenever you wanted something done, you would say, well, Joe wants it this way, and that was law. Joe's word was law.
It certainly sounds like you had some fantastic memories from your time working on Scooby. Is there a favourite that stands out to you in particular?
No, not really. Just doing some of those bad guys, Mr. Minor 49er, and getting them done. Mr. Alex Toth was doing them freelance also. And he would do not only the character, but he would do turnarounds, and he would do all the props in the picture and all the vehicles, and sometimes a background in a week. He was pretty well paid, but that's what saved our necks many times. No, I really enjoyed my work, and hiring and firing and meeting people. I had to learn how to do that, because, when I was offered just to be a supervisor, I thought, what, you want me to tell people what to do? I'd never done that. So it takes a certain amount of jumping in this. Just dive in and do it. And you learn by doing, you make mistakes, but that you learn from those. Anyway, so retired, I'm still drawing, do commissions occasionally, but I'm hitting those big numbers. I'm 95 now, and I do less work, but still try to keep my hand in doing something. You don't want to lose the skill. I used to teach character design, so at the union class. So I got an idea one day. I said, let's go all meet at the zoo in Los Angeles next time, and I gave him the assignment of draw the realistic animals just the way you see them, but bring back a cartoon version of it. Because one of the guys he came to me and he didn't know how the hind leg of a horse worked. It's sort of strange, looking. And I said, well, when you come to the zoo, start drawing all the animals you see and draw their hind legs. And you know what? Most all animals have the same leg as a horse does. It bends the same way. Cats, dogs, kangaroos, lions, tigers, elephants. I think that's the way nature designed the animals. With the hind leg that bends that certain way. So finally he understood it. And But it's a very interesting thing when they brought back all their drawings. We just pinned them up on the wall, and it was surprising what they did. Also, if you don't know what character, why don't you find a photograph of somebody and make a cartoon out of them by looking at the photograph? But make exaggerations, simplicity. Find an artist, a cartoonist that you like. If you copy anybody's work, you will understand how they drew that. And if you do enough copying, you'll be able to draw in that style without looking at their work at all, because you understand them. When an animator gets a new character, like in a Scooby, he will copy all of the model sheets, actually trace them on a blackboard. And he'll begin to get the feeling of how it's built, what it looks like. And what he's doing is programming his brain with that style. And so it's much easier when he starts drawing. If you understand the volumes and and you measure the areas of a face, that's the one thing that art school taught me, was how to measure with my eye. And it's a big thing to learn. What I do is I let them draw something, and then I'll look at it, and I'll make comments, or I'll draw my version of that and tell them what they could have done, or the mistake that they made. I know people like to watch an artist draw.
Obviously, we've touched a lot about teaching, and this channel recently we spoke to Victor Cook, and he directed Scooby Doo Mystery Incorporated, and he told us that you were his storyboard teacher in the 1980s. Like, what does it feel like they've had such an impact just on Scooby Doo and animation in general like that?
Well, the studio decided they wanted to start a class at night to hire new students in and help them teach them. So being a couple of other people we started to do that, teach night classes in storyboard, character design, and layout. The trouble was the studio didn't have any policy of hiring any of them. So although we trained some people, they all got other jobs at other studios. So we stopped doing that. But I'm sure, I don't know whether Disney does that or not. But the Disney used the Don Graham studio. In fact, they bring Don Graham into the studio, and he would teach the animators. He would have a class in figure drawing or movements or setting drapery, things like that. That's a big part of learning to draw, is drawing drapery. What happens when you raise up a shirt? There's bunch and there's stretch. So I have to learn how to not put all these lines in, but maybe one or two. But knowing how to handle drapery is a big part of learning how to draw characters. Really a big help. And drawing in volume is hard for some people too. As a kid, most kids draw, by the way, but you'll notice they always draw front view. And is the unusual child who draws 3/4, unless you ask them to or show them how to do it. Profile is very easy to draw too, but 3/4 is difficult. But it shows the volume of most animation is drawn in volume, like the Scooby Doo show is. Other shows, it depends on the style. They could be very flat looking, like UPA Mitchell Magoo style. But even Woody Woodpecker is drawn in 3 dimensions. I once had the job for Disney. They needed some model sheets done. You remember the Reluctant Dragon way back in early Walt Disney film? They sold that character to overseas people who were making dolls and figurines, but they didn't have any model sheets on Reluctant Dragon. It's because maybe 1 or 2 guys were drawing the dragon, and somebody else is drawing everybody else, Binky and the rest of the crew. So they didn't bother with model sheets because they knew the character. Then they found out that the flying horses from Fantasia had no model sheets. So I did my research. I looked at films and drew from the screen and found drawings in books. And I finally put together all these drawings into several poses of the characters and presented it, and they were happy to have that. They would send it to Europe or wherever. But there's a big industry of making figurines from these cartoon characters. So anyway, there's a lot to animation, a lot of things to do. And now almost all colleges are teaching animation. Would you believe that? In fact, I wrote a book on how to do storyboards. And I have a friend in England who said if I send him some, he'll distribute them or sell them to the colleges. So through my friend, I've sent storyboard books, and now they're in 5 colleges in Europe, no, in Great Britain, being used, I hope. But I got some feedback that they are using them, yeah. Because it's very basic. It's like if you're an animator or a layout man, you want to learn how to do boards, a book like this will teach you. I spent 1.5 years on that book, illustrated it, wrote it, and the one who hired me to do it said, "Thank you, Bob," and he took off for Oregon. I never saw him again and never got paid.
Oh.
There's another lesson. Be careful of publishers. Make sure you get the contract looked at by a lawyer, because people will take advantage of you. So get an education. Like self-publishing is another way that artists will do storybooks, because they're not into animation or they want to do something else. They write stories and draw them. And with learning how to self-publish, it's sort of costly, but a lot of people do that, and it really works well. You don't have to split the profits with anybody. It's all yours.
We saw recently that there was a Bob Singer event at the Van Eaton Gallery. We were just wondering, what was that event like?
I went to a gallery in the Hollywood area. The Van Eaton Gallery is the biggest gallery in the West, maybe in the whole country. My house I'm living in, the floor plan, you could put 4 of those in that gallery. It was so big. They had taken, Van Eaton had moved there 6 months ago, and it was the Pier 1 Imports building. It was big. Anyway, they asked me to do an appearance there. So I spent 4 hours just meeting people, listening to their stories and talk. They just loved cartoons, especially Scooby. And because of that visit, I enjoyed it so much. We did an outreach to Las Vegas, a gallery over there. And we're going to do an appearance, I think, November 1st in Las Vegas. Same type of thing. I've done several of those when I did appearances for the studio. And it's surprising how many fans there are out there. You guys must get a lot of feedback from fans of your show. So you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. So I guess in the process of wrapping things up, I guess the last question would be, last time you mentioned that the Generation Gallery was having some of your art imported over to the UK. So is there any last thing that you want to shout out or plug before leaving us today?
Well, the Generation Gallery is in Manchester. And if you ever go there, tell Rob that Bob says hello. Because I did an appearance there some years ago, and we're still sending my work to them. In fact, they have maybe 7 or 8 of my limited editions artwork that we're publishing. on their walls. So anybody who's near Manchester, please go look at them at the Generation Gallery and say hello to Rob. Anyway, I really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you for inviting
Thank
me.
you so much. It was an absolute honor to have you here today. Thank you for being so generous with your time and for coming back on the show, because it is always a pleasure to hear from you, and I'm sure that everyone watching this will have absolutely loved hearing from you. So thank you so much for that.
And thank you. Talk to you again sometime.
Thank you everyone for watching that second interview with Bob Singer. It was absolutely incredible to hear from such a legend, of course, being renowned for Scooby Doo Where Are You, creating an iconic show that has lasted the test of time. It's still remembered in 2023 and will probably be remembered by the time our grandkids have passed away. So, I mean, that's just absolutely incredible. Sophie, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Instagram at Scooby for Life.
And Dan, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, both at danfaz94.
Thank you so much. So I'll be sure to link all of those in the description down below. Please make sure to check those out. And if you want to see our link tree, that will also be linked in the description as well, with our Twitter, Instagram, and all of those good things. So if you do want to see this and more interviews in the future, then please like, comment, and subscribe.
JayBee and Milly.